Genealogy.com. It's good to be back. I know it has been a while since I have been making videos, but I have a whole series I'm going to be uploading in the next several days. So let's get started. Today I want to talk about avoiding pitfalls, but particularly how to avoid pitfalls when it comes to Native American research. I have at least 5 tips I want to suggest that you follow. Let's get started. Number 1, follow the trail of names. Avoid the search for gold. What does that mean? Well, there are many people that I get emails from quite often who are very interested in trying to find some information on their family, hoping that they will be able to get some monetary gain. Somehow there is a feeling that having or documenting Native American ancestry somehow is going to give you financial gain. It's going to give you an Indian scholarship, or maybe you'll get involved with one of the casino tribes or what have you. You know, you're not going to find many people who are going to help you if that is your goal. Always abandon that concept before you get started, because as a genealogist, my job is to find ways of getting that story, getting to those records, following the trail, following the documents. They're going to connect one generation to the generation that preceded it. It's not about helping you get an Indian scholarship or other types of funds that you may perceive may be awaiting you. So please understand that. Second tip, yes, stay focused on the records and not on racial features. How many times have I gotten a commentary from someone who said, wow, you know, you can just look at my great-grandmother's photograph and tell that she's Native American. You know why? Because she's got high cheekbones and she's got the long hair. When did racial characteristics tell you the story and the history of your ancestors? You know, first of all, there's no such thing as low cheekbones. And secondly, people in many parts of the world, from Asia to South America to Eastern Europe, have long hair. Those are not pieces of evidence that one can use to trace one's Native American history. You want to stay focused upon the records. It's the records that are going to tell you the story, and they're going to be the ones that are going to connect you to the right geographic community, to the right social community in which your ancestors lived. If they lived in a region in East Tennessee, they probably had very little, if any, ever contact with a community of people who lived in the heart of the Choctaw Nation. So it's very important, yes, pay attention to those other factors, such as geography, but by all means, let the records guide you. By all means. Thirdly, call your ancestors what they were. You know, I often have heard people indicate that their ancestors were part of a particular tribe, and the tribe that they may give a reference to lives 1,100 miles away from where their family is and was geographically. And it's very interesting. Probably the one most quoted, well, perhaps the second most quoted, probably the most quoted ethnic group is some variation of Cherokee, and many people will claim that there's a Cherokee ancestor somewhere in the line, but probably the second most quoted or misquoted association that individuals have is a reference to a Blackfoot ancestor. I've heard people from New Jersey, through the Carolinas, through Louisiana, other parts of the South make this claim. And there are many people who are out there who are doing research, and they become very disappointed that they don't find the records that connect them and prove that they are a Blackfoot Indian of some sort. And what's interesting is that the request is so frequent that even now, if you go on the website of the Blackfoot Nation out of Browning, Montana, they even have a statement that if your ancestors are from the southeastern part of the United States, and they talk about a couple of geographic areas, chances are that maybe this was a nickname or a name that was used symbolically, but it really did not connect to them, because apparently there must be people who are calling or contacting the tribe as well for information. But it is important that you learn the geography. If you learn the historic geography of the region where your ancestors lived, you may find who the indigenous people who were living there at the time in which your ancestors were there. In addition, you may find out historically who was there when settlers came to that area. Find out with whom treaties were made, and sometimes with whom treaties were broken, as was the case many, many times. But it is very important that you follow the records. Stick to the geography, so you will be able to call your ancestors what they were. You're not going to find a record, mind you, that's going to reflect a community of Blackfoot Indians in New Jersey. That's just not going to happen. But at the same time, you also want to learn, well, who was in eastern Tennessee? Who was in northern Louisiana? Who did have a history that was there? That's what you want to do. And of course, what I'm describing is all part of embracing standard methodology. It's very, very, very important that you do this. One of the things that you also want to maintain the integrity of your research. The operative word is research. You want to avoid invention. I have had individuals ask me questions to hopefully help them formulate a reason why they can't find a particular ancestor in a particular community. And I've had questions such as whether there was a possibility that the family may have decided to pass as another ethnic group because it was just so hard being recognized or being identified as native in a particular community, which might be the case, might not be the case. What is that being based on? Are you inventing the reason why you've had difficulty following the paper trail, or is there something else that you've read about that proves that there was a large migration, or number one, was the group that you're hoping to make a connection with present even in that region? It's very important. Use standard methodology to stay on track, and you want to avoid inventing the story why you have not found what you have found. One of the things that I've often found is asked if I could help someone prove that they are of a particular American Indian community. And I find that the effort to research in order to prove, as opposed to research with objectivity to find, can be a little bit misleading. The person who's going to research to prove is sometimes not going to look at information objectively, because they're going to try and force the data into what they want it to be. If your mind is open and you're willing to say, there's a possibility that I might find something new, let me see what the documents reflect. Of course, you are going to analyze the documents when you find them, but your goal should be to research to find out what is there, to find out what some of those missing stories are, to find out what other clues that you can utilize to go on to research additional data. But simply, if you're beginning the process to prove ties to a Native American tribe, you really might get derailed. And an example, I have gotten pieces of email from individuals who have insisted that their ancestors who moved from Virginia to Ohio, and then perhaps left and migrated to another region were part of individuals who lived in the Choctaw Nation. Why? Because they found their Ohio relatives on the Dawes Rolls. Really? You know, no one from Ohio would have been given a land allotment in the Choctaw Nation, which eventually became part of course, the state of Oklahoma in 1907 when statehood came. Many individuals have really run into what I would call a coincidence of names. This is a name that might reflect the name of someone in your family, but you know geographically your ties are from the Midwest and your ties are from Virginia, and you know, even though there may have been that oral history narrative in the family that there's Native American tie, that particular family is that you have found on the Dawes records, which did not include anyone from Ohio, that's not your family. And it's difficult sometimes to hear that because you want it to be so. But understand also the geographic limitations that were certainly a part of the whole process of the Dawes interview. Your family's from East Tennessee. They didn't suddenly in 1899 or 1900 or 1901 go to Oklahoma to get their land. And I've heard people say that to me. Oh yes, my great-grandmother was Indian and she went to Oklahoma at the turn of the century to go get her land. Chances are you may want to revisit the family history a little bit more closely. It is very important that you do that. Another point, you do want to separate your research, your efforts to find and document your family history. You want to separate that from the process of tribal enrollment. Two different exercises, two different things. You can research your family history forever and not have tribal enrollment be a part of it, and understand that there are different types of rules and regulations within all of the 500 plus federally recognized tribes for enrollment. And you know, sometimes people will assume that you're doing genealogy for that purpose. And I know it can be misleading. You go on and type Native American genealogy, and sometimes you may land on a government site, a BIA site or another site, and you'll see the word genealogy and Native American ancestry, and then you'll start seeing things about certificate of degree of Indian blood, CDIV cards, and other things. And you'll find that, oh my gosh, it must be something that goes hand in hand. Separate the two. One is a different process and it's governed by rules, constitutional rules within that nation. And history, the records that are in the public domain are there for you to do regardless of whether or not tribal enrollment ever waltzes through your mind. The fact is that you want to separate the two. The most important thing that you as a family historian want to do is to document the family story. You want to tell the story. You want to connect your ancestors to the generation that preceded them. You also want to be able to place them on the proper historical landscape. You must use standard methodology to do this. You must use objectivity as you conduct your research. You must follow the trail of records, the trail of names, and of course you must avoid the search for gold as a source to motivate you in that quest. It's certainly possible to do. I have an entire presentation that I give on documenting Native American families in 20th century and 19th century records. It can be done. Avoid invention. You don't have to invent a group that existed 600-700 years ago, keeping in mind that our nation is less than 300 years old. There is a way, though, to document your history, and I hope you enjoy that journey. Anyway, thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.